The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Griffith Park as Chloe Lopez wiped down the last bench near the playground. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the concrete as she moved methodically, her cleaning supplies rattling in the cart beside her. At 23, she'd already mastered the art of becoming invisible, just another face in the crowd of workers, keeping Los Angeles beautiful for those who could afford to enjoy it. She paused, watching a group of children race across the colorful playground equipment. Their laughter echoed through the air, pure and carefree. Chloe's chest tightened with familiar longing. She'd spent countless nights in foster homes, watching other families through windows, wondering what it felt like to belong somewhere. "Excuse me, lady." The small voice made her turn. A boy, maybe 5 years old, stood before her with the kind of confidence that only came from never knowing want. His clothes were expensive, designer jeans and a pristine white polo that probably cost more than Chloe made in a week, but his dark eyes held something that made her heart skip: loneliness. "Hi there," Chloe said, crouching to his level. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The boy studied her with an intensity that seemed far too mature for his age. Then, without warning, he reached out and took her hand. His small fingers were warm and surprisingly strong. "You're my wife now," he announced with a brilliant smile that transformed his entire face. Chloe blinked, caught completely off guard. "I'm... what?" "My wife," Junseo repeated matter-of-factly, as if he'd just declared the sky was blue. "I choose you. You're pretty, and you look sad like me. Daddy says when you find someone who understands your sadness, you should keep them." The innocence in his voice made Chloe's throat tight. She glanced around the playground, looking for frantic parents, but saw only other children playing and a few scattered adults on benches, none paying attention to them. "Okay," she heard herself say, surprising them both. "I'm your wife now." Junseo's smile could have powered the entire city. "Really? Really?" Chloe couldn't help but smile back. There was something magical about the moment. This beautiful, lonely child choosing her, of all people, to be his pretend family. "What's your name, wife?" Junseo asked seriously. "Chloe, what's yours, husband?" "Junseo, but you can call me honey," he said with the gravity of someone making a very important decision. Chloe laughed, a real laugh that surprised her with its warmth. "Okay, honey, what should we do now that we're married?" "We should go on our honeymoon," Junseo declared. "To the swings." As they walked hand in hand toward the swing set, Chloe felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck. She turned and froze. A man stood about 50 yards away, partially hidden behind a large oak tree. Even from this distance, she could tell he was watching them intently. Yoon Jae-sung stepped out from behind the tree, his expensive suit somehow managing to look casual despite its obvious quality. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of sharp features that belonged on magazine covers. But it was his eyes that made Chloe's breath catch. Dark, intelligent, and filled with a mixture of surprise and something that looked almost like hope. He approached slowly, like someone trying not to spook a wild animal. "Junseo," he called softly. The boy turned, his face lighting up even more. "Daddy, come meet my wife." The man's steps faltered slightly, his gaze shifting between his son and Chloe. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes, the way his jaw was set with constant tension. This was a man carrying invisible weights. "Your wife?" Jae-sung's voice was deep, with the faintest trace of an accent that made Chloe's pulse quicken. "Yes, her name is Chloe, and she's perfect," Junseo announced, swinging their joined hands. "She said yes when I asked her to marry me." Jae-sung's eyes met Chloe's, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. She saw surprise there, yes, but also something deeper, a longing that mirrored her own. "I'm sorry," Chloe said quickly, suddenly aware of how this must look. We were just playing. I didn't mean to." "No," Jae-sung said quietly, his gaze never leaving her face. "Don't apologize, he hasn't. He hasn't smiled like that in a very long time." The weight in his voice made Chloe's chest ache. She looked down at Junseo, who was beaming up at both of them, like he'd just solved the world's greatest puzzle. Jae-sung's phone buzzed. The sound cut through the moment like a blade, and Chloe watched as his entire demeanor shifted. The warmth in his eyes disappeared, replaced by something hard and alert. He glanced at the screen, and his jaw tightened. "We have to go," he said, but his voice had changed, become colder, more distant. "But Daddy, I just got married," Jun-seo protested. "Now, Jun-seo." The authority in Jae-sung's voice was absolute, and Chloe saw the child's shoulders slump in defeat. As Jae-sung gently but firmly took his son's hand, separating him from Chloe, their eyes met again. This time, she saw something that made her blood run cold, fear. Not for himself, but for his son. For her. "I'm sorry," he said again, and she could tell he meant it. "Maybe. Maybe we'll see you again." "I hope so," Chloe whispered, surprising herself with how much she meant it. As they walked away, Jun-seo turned back and waved. "Bye, wife. I'll come find you tomorrow." Chloe waved back, watching until they disappeared around a bend in the path. Only then did she notice the black sedan that had been parked across the street, its engine running. As soon as Jae-sung and Jun-seo got into a sleek silver car, the sedan pulled out behind them. Something cold settled in Chloe's stomach. She looked down at her hand, the one Jun-seo had held, and realized it was trembling. What had she just gotten herself into? 3 days passed before Chloe saw them again. She'd found herself returning to the same bench each afternoon, telling herself she was just doing her job, but knowing she was hoping for another glimpse of the lonely little boy who'd chosen her as his pretend wife. When Jun-seo came running across the playground toward her, his face bright with joy, Chloe felt something in her chest loosen for the first time in years. "Wife, you came back," he shouted, launching himself into her arms with the complete trust that only children possessed. Chloe caught him, spinning him around as he giggled. "Of course I came back. A wife always keeps her promises." "I told Daddy you would be here," Jun-seo said proudly. "He said maybe, but I knew. Wives don't leave their husbands." The innocent confidence in his voice made Chloe's heart clench. She looked up to find Jae-sung approaching more slowly this time, his expression unreadable. Today he wore dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look younger, more approachable but no less dangerous. "Hello again," he said, and Chloe was struck by how carefully he chose his words. "Hi." She set Jun-seo down but kept hold of his hand. "I hope it's okay that I'm here. I work in this area most afternoons." "It's more than okay," Jae-sung said quietly. "He's been talking about you non-stop. His wife this, his wife that. Mrs. Han thinks he's lost his mind." "Mrs. Han? Our housekeeper. She's been with us since." He trailed off, something painful flickering across his features. "Since Jun-seo was born." Chloe sensed there was more to that story, but before she could respond, Jun-seo tugged on her hand. "Come on, wife. I want to show you the monkey bars. Daddy says I'm almost big enough to do them by myself." As they walked toward the playground equipment, Chloe became aware of Jae-sung walking beside them, his presence both comforting and unsettling. There was something about him that set her nerves on edge, not in a bad way, but in a way that made her hyper-aware of everything around them. "So what do you do for work?" she asked, trying to make conversation as Jun-seo scrambled up the ladder to the monkey bars. The question seemed to catch Jae-sung off guard. I'm in business. Import and export mostly." It was a non-answer, and they both knew it. Chloe glanced at him sideways, taking in the expensive watch on his wrist, the way he carried himself with absolute confidence, the subtle tension that never seemed to leave his shoulders. "That's vague," she said carefully. Jae-sung's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "I suppose it is. What about you? Besides being a professional wife, I mean." The teasing in his voice made her stomach flutter. "I clean things, buildings mostly. Sometimes houses. Whatever pays the bills." She waited for the judgment, the subtle shift in his expression that would tell her she wasn't worth his time. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "Honest work," he said. "There's honor in that." "Look, wife, look," Jun-seo called from the monkey bars. He was hanging from the first rung, his little legs kicking with determination. "I'm looking, honey," Chloe called back. "You're so strong." "Daddy, take a picture of me and my wife." Jae-sung pulled out his phone, the latest iPhone, Chloe noticed, and held it up. "Smile for the camera, Mrs. I'm sorry, I don't know your last name." "Lopez. Chloe Lopez." "Mrs. Lopez," he said, and something about the way he said her name made her skin tingle. As he took the photo, Chloe found herself studying his profile. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and those dark eyes that seemed to see everything. But there was something else, something that made her want to smooth away the tension lines around his eyes. "Got it," he said, showing them the photo. In it, Jun Seo was grinning widely from the monkey bars, while Chloe stood below, her face bright with genuine happiness. It looked, she realized with a start, like a real family photo. "Send it to me," Jun Seo demanded, as he dropped down from the bars. "I want to show Mrs. Han my wife." "I don't think," Chloe started. "What's your number?" Jae-sung asked quietly. Their eyes met, and Chloe felt that strange electric current again. Slowly, she recited her number, watching as he typed it into his phone. A moment later, her own phone buzzed with the photo. "There," Jae-sung said. "Now you have proof of your marriage." "This is the best day ever," Jun Seo announced, throwing his arms around both of them in a group hug that brought Chloe and Jae-sung closer together than they'd ever been. For just a moment, Chloe could smell Jae-sung's cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, see the way his eyes softened when he looked at his son. Then his phone rang. The change was instant and jarring. Jae-sung stepped back, his entire body going rigid as he looked at the caller ID. The warmth disappeared from his eyes, replaced by something cold and professional. "I have to take this," he said curtly, already moving away from them. Chloe watched as he walked several yards away, his voice dropping to a low, urgent tone. She couldn't make out the words, but she could hear the authority in his voice, the way he spoke like someone accustomed to giving orders and having them followed without question. "Daddy has a lot of important phone calls," Jun Seo said matter-of-factly. "He talks to people about business stuff. Sometimes he has to go to meetings at night." "What kind of meetings?" Chloe asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Jun Seo shrugged. "I don't know. Grown-up stuff. But he always comes home with presents for me, so they must be good meetings." Chloe glanced back at Jae-sung, who was now pacing as he talked, one hand running through his dark hair in what looked like frustration. Whatever the call was about, it wasn't good news. When he returned, his face was a mask of controlled tension. "We have to go," he said, the warmth from earlier completely gone. "But we just got here," Jun Seo protested. "Now, Jun Seo." The finality in his voice brooked no argument. As they gathered their things, Chloe felt a strange sense of loss. The afternoon had felt like stepping into someone else's life, a life where she belonged somewhere, where she was wanted. "Will I see you again?" she asked before she could stop herself. Jae-sung paused, his hand on Jun Seo's shoulder. When he looked at her, she saw conflict warring in his dark eyes. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I want to say yes, but..." "But what?" "But wanting something and being able to have it are two different things." The sadness in his voice made her chest ache. Before she could respond, he was walking away, Jun Seo's small hand in his large one. "Bye, wife," Jun Seo called over his shoulder. "I'll dream about you." Chloe stood there long after they'd disappeared, the photo on her phone the only proof that the afternoon had been real. As she finally turned to leave, she noticed the black sedan again, parked in a different spot, but unmistakably the same car. This time, she was sure it was following them. That night, as Chloe lay in her tiny studio apartment, she stared at the photo on her phone. In it, she looked happier than she had in years. Jun Seo looked like any normal, joyful child, and Jae-sung. Jae-sung looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. She fell asleep wondering what secrets he was hiding, and why a simple afternoon in the park felt like the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. Over the next 2 weeks, a pattern emerged. Every few days, Chloe would find herself at the park during her afternoon break, and somehow Jae-sung and Jun Seo would appear. It felt too convenient to be coincidence, but Chloe didn't question it. These stolen moments had become the brightest part of her otherwise exhausting routine. "Wife, look what I learned," Junseo called out, demonstrating his newfound ability to go down the slide backwards. "That's amazing, honey," Chloe applauded, genuinely impressed. "You're getting so brave." "Daddy taught me. He says brave people do things even when they're scared." Chloe glanced at Jae-sung, who was sitting beside her on the bench, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his arm almost touching hers. "That's good advice." "Is it?" Jae-sung asked quietly, his eyes fixed on his son. "Sometimes I wonder if being brave is just another word for being stupid." There was something in his voice that made Chloe study his profile. Today, like every other day, he looked perfectly put together. Expensive clothes, perfect hair, that aura of controlled power. But she was beginning to notice the small things, the way his jaw tightened when his phone buzzed, the constant scanning of their surroundings, the fact that he never fully relaxed even here. "You seem like someone who would know the difference," she said carefully. Jae-sung turned to look at her, and for a moment his mask slipped. She saw exhaustion there, and something that looked almost like longing. "Do I?" he asked. "Sometimes I feel like I don't know anything anymore." Before Chloe could respond, Junseo came running over, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Daddy, can my wife come to dinner with us? Mrs. Han is making bulgogi tonight, and I want to show her my room." The request hung in the air between them. Chloe saw Jae-sung's internal struggle play out across his features, want warring with something that looked like fear. "I don't think that's a good idea, buddy," he said gently. "Why not?" Junseo's face fell. "She's my wife. Wives are supposed to come to dinner." "It's okay," Chloe said quickly, not wanting to cause problems. "Maybe another time." "But when?" Junseo pressed. "You never say when." Jae-sung's phone buzzed, and Chloe watched his face harden as he read the message. Whatever it said made him stand abruptly. "We have to go, now." "But Daddy—" "Now, Junseo." The authority in his voice was absolute, but Chloe caught the underlying tension, almost like fear. As they hurried away, Chloe noticed two men in dark suits who had been sitting on a nearby bench suddenly stand as well. They followed at a distance, but they were definitely following. That night, Chloe couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She found herself checking her phone constantly, hoping for a text from Jae-sung, but none came. When she finally fell asleep, her dreams were filled with dark cars and worried dark eyes. The next morning brought an unexpected surprise. When Chloe arrived at her first cleaning job, a small office building downtown, her supervisor Diego Rivera was waiting for her with a smile. "Good news, Lopez," he said, handing her a new assignment sheet. "You've been requested specifically for a new contract. Big office building in Beverly Hills. The pay is double your usual rate." Chloe stared at the paper in confusion. "Requested? By who?" "Some fancy company. They said they heard you do excellent work." Diego shrugged. "Who cares? It's good money, and God knows you could use it." The building was indeed fancy, all glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like a monument to wealth. As Chloe worked her way through the pristine offices, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was too good to be true. Companies like this didn't just randomly request specific cleaning staff. It was on her third day there that she saw him. Jae-sung stepped out of the elevator on the 20th floor, looking every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit. But when he saw her, his steps faltered. "Chloe?" He looked genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Working," she said slowly, studying his face. "What are you doing here?" I have a meeting." But his eyes were darting around nervously, and she could see him calculating something. "Jae-sung," she said carefully, "did you arrange for me to get this job?" The guilt that flashed across his features was answer enough. "Why?" she asked. He was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I wanted to make sure you were safe." "Safe from what?" Before he could answer, the elevator dinged and two men stepped out. They were Asian, wearing expensive suits, and when they saw Jae-sung talking to Chloe, their expressions darkened. "Mr. Yoon," one of them said in accented English, "your meeting is waiting." Jae-sung's entire demeanor changed. The warmth disappeared from his eyes, replaced by something cold and dangerous. When he looked at the men, Chloe saw a side of him that made her blood run cold. "I'll be right there," he said, his voice carrying an authority that made both men step back slightly. He turned back to Chloe, and for just a moment she saw desperation in his eyes. "Stay away from me," he said quietly. "Please, for your own good." Then he was gone, walking away with the two men flanking him like bodyguards. Or guards, period. Chloe stood there for a long time, her cleaning supplies forgotten, trying to process what had just happened. The pieces were starting to come together, forming a picture she didn't want to see. The expensive clothes, the constant tension, the phone calls, the men following them, the way he'd arranged for her to get a better job without telling her. Jae-sung wasn't just wealthy, he was something else entirely, something dangerous. That evening, as Chloe walked home from the bus stop, she noticed the car immediately. It was different from the sedan she'd seen before, a dark SUV with tinted windows, driving slowly behind her. When she turned a corner, it turned too. When she stopped to look in a shop window, it stopped as well. Her heart began to race. She ducked into a convenience store, pretending to browse while watching the street through the window. The SUV was parked across the street, engine running. Chloe pulled out her phone with shaking hands and scrolled to Jae-sung's number. She'd never called him before. Their communication had been limited to brief texts about meeting times. He answered on the first ring. "Chloe? What's wrong?" "I think someone's following me," she whispered. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, "Where are you?" She gave him the address, her voice shaking. "Stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'm coming." The line went dead. 15 minutes later, Jae-sung's silver car pulled up in front of the store. But he wasn't alone. Yoon Shi-yoon, a man she'd never seen before but who radiated the same dangerous energy as Jae-sung, got out of the passenger seat and walked calmly toward the SUV. Chloe watched through the window as he approached the driver's side. She couldn't hear what was said, but whatever it was made the SUV speed away immediately. Jae-sung entered the store, his face a mask of controlled fury. When he saw her, some of the tension left his shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hands hovering near her arms, as if he wanted to touch her but didn't dare. "I'm fine, but Jae-sung, what's going on? Who were those people? Why are they following me?" He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, she saw defeat there. "Because of me," he said simply. "They're following you because of me." "I don't understand." Jae-sung looked around the store, then back at her. "Not here. Come on, I'll drive you home." The ride to her apartment was silent, tension filling the car like smoke. When they pulled up in front of her building, Jae-sung turned off the engine but made no move to leave. "Chloe," he said finally, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. You can't see me anymore. You can't see Junseo anymore. It's not safe." "Not safe? How?" she demanded. "What aren't you telling me?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "My family. We're not just in business. We're in a very specific kind of business. The kind that makes enemies, the kind that puts people I care about in danger." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Are you saying you're—" "I'm saying that being near me, being near my son, could get you hurt. Or worse." Chloe stared at him, her mind reeling. The man who played with his son in the park, who looked at her like she was something precious, who had somehow arranged for her to get better work. This man was telling her he was dangerous. "I don't believe you," she said finally. "What?" "I don't believe you're a bad person. I've seen you with Junseo. I've seen how you look at him, how you protect him. Bad people don't love like that." Jae-sung's composure cracked, and she saw raw pain in his eyes. "You don't understand. The things I've done, the things I have to do—" "Then help me understand," she interrupted. "Don't just push me away. Help me understand." For a moment, she thought he might. She could see the war raging behind his eyes, the desperate want to trust her warring with years of caution. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went white. "I have to go," he said urgently. There's a situation." "Jae-sung, promise me you'll stay away," he said, grabbing her hand. "Promise me you won't try to find us. Please." The desperation in his voice scared her more than anything else had. "I promise," she whispered. But as she watched him drive away, Chloe knew it was a promise she wouldn't be able to keep. Whatever Jae-sung was involved in, whatever danger surrounded him and Junseo, she was already in too deep to walk away. She was in love with them both. For 3 weeks, Chloe kept her promise. She avoided the park, threw herself into her work, and tried to forget the feeling of Junseo's small hand in hers or the way Jae-sung looked at her like she was something miraculous. It was the hardest 3 weeks of her life. Her friend Nicole Rivera noticed the change immediately. They'd been working together for 2 years, and Nicole had never seen Chloe this distracted. "Okay, spill," Nicole said as they cleaned the lobby of their latest assignment, a high-end hotel in downtown LA. "You've been moping around like someone stole your puppy. What's going on?" Chloe considered lying, but Nicole had a way of seeing through her that made deception pointless. "I met someone," as she said finally. "And that's good news, right? You never meet anyone." "It's complicated." "Honey, all the good ones are complicated. What's his deal? Married, broke, secretly gay." "Secretly dangerous," Chloe muttered. Nicole stopped mopping and stared at her. "What kind of dangerous?" Before Chloe could answer, her phone buzzed. The number was unknown, but something about it made her heart race. "Hello? Is this Chloe Lopez?" The voice was female, older, with a slight accent. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Han Yeri. I work for the Yoon family. Mr. Yoon asked me to call you." Chloe's grip tightened on the phone. "Is everything okay? Is Junseo—" "The boy is fine, but he's been asking for you. Every day he asks when his wife is coming back," Mr. Yoon thought. "Perhaps you could visit. Just once." Chloe closed her eyes, torn between want and the promise she'd made. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please," the woman said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "The child has been so sad. And Mr. Yoon. He's not himself either. Just one visit. What harm could it do?" Everything, Chloe thought, but she found herself saying, "When? This afternoon I can send a car." "No," Chloe said quickly. "I'll find my own way. Just give me the address." The Yoon family home was in Beverly Hills, behind gates that probably cost more than Chloe made in 5 years. As she stood at the intercom, second-guessing her decision, the gates swung open silently. The house was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal, all clean lines and expensive materials, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens, but it felt more like a fortress than a home. Han Yeri met her at the front door. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd spent years managing a household. "Miss Lopez," she said warmly. "Thank you for coming. Junseo is in the garden. He doesn't know you're here. I thought it would be a nice surprise." As they walked through the house, Chloe couldn't help but stare. Everything was beautiful and expensive, but it felt cold somehow. There were no family photos, no personal touches that would indicate a child lived here. "Where is Mr. Yoon?" Chloe asked. "He had to step out for a meeting. He should be back soon." They emerged onto a terrace that overlooked an enormous backyard. Junseo was sitting alone on a swing set, pushing himself listlessly back and forth. Even from a distance, Chloe could see the sadness in his small shoulders. "Junseo," Mrs. Han called. "You have a visitor." The boy looked up, and when he saw Chloe, his face transformed. He launched himself off the swing and ran toward her with such joy that Chloe felt tears prick her eyes. "Wife, you came back." He threw himself into her arms with complete abandon. "Hi, honey," Chloe whispered, holding him tight. "I missed you too." "I knew you'd come back. Daddy said maybe you wouldn't, but I knew. Wives don't leave their husbands forever." The faith in his voice broke her heart. She looked up to find Mrs. Han watching them with a sad smile. "He's been so lonely," the older woman said quietly. "Since his mother died, he's had trouble connecting with people. But with you. His mother died. Chloe's heart clenched. 2 years ago. Cancer. It was very hard on both of them. That explained so much. The sadness in Junseo's eyes, the way Jae-sung seemed to carry the weight of the world, the desperation with which they'd both clung to the idea of family, even a pretend one. Come on. Wife, Junseo said, tugging her hand. I want to show you everything. My room and the pool and the place where Daddy teaches me to fight. To fight? Just in case, Junseo said matter-of-factly. Daddy says I need to know how to protect myself and the people I love. As they toured the house, Chloe began to notice things that made her uneasy. Security cameras everywhere. Windows that looked bulletproof. Doors that seemed unusually heavy and solid. This wasn't just a wealthy man's home, it was a fortress. Junseo, she said carefully as they sat in his bedroom, a child's paradise filled with toys and books. What does your daddy do for work? He takes care of people, Junseo said, arranging his action figures in elaborate battle formations. He makes sure they're safe and that bad people don't hurt them. What kind of bad people? Junseo shrugged. I don't know. But sometimes Daddy has to go to meetings at night to talk to them. He always comes back, though. He promised he'd never leave me like Mommy did. The innocence in his voice made Chloe's chest tight. Whatever Jae-sung was involved in, he was trying to shield his son from it. They were in the middle of an elaborate game involving Junseo's entire collection of toy cars when they heard the front door open. Junseo's face lit up. Daddy's home. Come on, wife, I want him to see you. But when they reached the top of the stairs, Chloe could hear voices from below. Jae-sung's and several others, all speaking in rapid Korean. The tone was urgent, angry. Wait here, she told Junseo, but he was already creeping toward the stairs, clearly accustomed to eavesdropping on his father's business. From their position at the top of the stairs, they could see into the living room below. Jae-sung stood in the center of a group of men, all of them wearing expensive suits and serious expressions. The conversation was heated, and even though Chloe couldn't understand the words, she could feel the tension radiating from the group. Then she heard her name. Chloe Lopez, one of the men said clearly, and her blood ran cold. Jae-sung's response was sharp, authoritative, but the other man shook his head and pulled out a tablet showing Jae-sung something on the screen. Whatever it was made Jae-sung's face go white. The conversation continued for several more minutes before the men left. Chloe and Junseo scrambled back to his room, but not before she saw Jae-sung sink into a chair and put his head in his hands. Is Daddy okay? Junseo whispered. I'm sure he's fine, Chloe said, but her heart was racing. When Jae-sung appeared in the doorway 10 minutes later, he looked like a man who'd aged years in the space of an hour. His eyes found Chloe immediately, and she saw fear there, not for himself, but for her. Junseo, he said quietly, why don't you go help Mrs. Han in the kitchen? I need to talk to Chloe. But Daddy, now son. The authority in his voice brooked no argument. Junseo hugged Chloe tightly before reluctantly leaving the room. Jae-sung closed the door behind him and leaned against it, his eyes never leaving her face. You shouldn't have come, he said. Mrs. Han called me. She said Junseo was sad. Mrs. Han doesn't understand the situation. Then explain it to me, Chloe said, standing up. I heard my name downstairs. Those men were talking about me. Jae-sung closed his eyes. Chloe, no more secrets, she said firmly. If I'm in danger, I have a right to know why. When he opened his eyes, she saw resignation there. My family has been involved in certain activities. For 3 generations, he said carefully. We provide services that others can't or won't provide. Protection, mediation, problem-solving. You're talking about crime. I'm talking about survival in a world where the law doesn't always reach. Chloe stared at him. You're in the Korean Mafia. The bluntness of her statement seemed to surprise him. That's a very American way of putting it, but essentially, yes. And those men downstairs were telling me that our rivals have noticed you. They know about our connection. They see you as a potential weakness. The room seemed to spin around her. A weakness? Someone they could use to get to me, to get to Junseo. Chloe sank back onto the bed, her mind reeling. So when you said I was in danger, I meant it. Being near me, caring about me, it puts a target on your back. And you've known this the whole time. I suspected it from the beginning. That's why I tried to stay away. That's why I arranged for you to get better work. I wanted you to be safe, but I also wanted to be able to keep an eye on you. You've been watching me. Protecting you, he corrected. There's a difference. Chloe stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the garden looked peaceful, beautiful. It was hard to believe that this world of privilege and beauty was built on something so dangerous. What happens now? She asked without turning around. Now you disappear. I'll arrange for you to relocate, get a new job somewhere far from here. You'll be safe and so will Junseo. And if I don't want to disappear? The silence stretched so long that she finally turned around. Jae-sung was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Then you'll probably die, he said simply. And so will I, because I'll do anything to protect you, even if it destroys everything I've built. The raw honesty in his voice made her knees weak. You care about me that much? I love you, he said quietly. I've loved you since that first day in the park, when you agreed to be his wife without question, when you looked at my son like he was something precious instead of an inconvenience. I love your kindness, your strength, the way you make both of us feel like we're worth something. Tears sprang to Chloe's eyes. Jae-sung, but love isn't enough. Not in my world. In my world, love is a liability that gets people killed. Before she could respond, an explosion of sound erupted from downstairs, shouting, crashing, the unmistakable sound of violence. Jae-sung was moving before the first shout faded, pulling a gun from somewhere inside his jacket with practiced ease. Stay here, he commanded. Lock the door behind me. No matter what you hear, don't come out. What about Junseo? Mrs. Han knows what to do. She'll keep him safe. He was at the door when the lights went out. In the darkness, Chloe heard him curse in Korean. Then his hand found hers. Change of plans, he said grimly. We're leaving, now. The house had become a war zone. Through the darkness, Chloe could hear men shouting in multiple languages, the crash of furniture being overturned, and underneath it all the terrifying sound of Junseo crying. My son, Jae-sung breathed, his grip on Chloe's hand tightening. Go, she said immediately. Go get him. I'll be fine. I'm not leaving you. Jae-sung, he's scared. He needs you. For a moment she thought he might argue. Then he pressed something cold and heavy into her hand, a gun. Do you know how to use this? No. Point and pull the trigger. Don't hesitate. His voice was grim. Stay behind me. Whatever happens, stay behind me. They moved through the darkened house like ghosts, Jae-sung leading with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of his territory. The sounds of fighting were coming from the first floor, but they seemed to be moving toward the stairs. The safe room, Jae-sung whispered. Mrs. Han should have taken Junseo to the safe room. They reached a door that Chloe hadn't noticed during her tour. It looked like part of the wall, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Jae-sung pressed his hand against a hidden scanner, and the door slid open silently. Inside was a small room filled with monitors, showing security camera feeds from around the house. Mrs. Han sat in a chair with Junseo on her lap, both of them watching the screens with tense concentration. Daddy! Junseo launched himself at his father, who caught him with his free arm while keeping his gun trained on the doorway. Are you hurt? Jae-sung asked, his hands quickly checking his son for injuries. No, but there are bad men in our house, Junseo said, his voice shaking. Mrs. Han said they want to hurt us. They're not going to hurt anyone, Jae-sung said firmly. I promise. Mrs. Han stood, her face grim. There are 8 of them. They came through the back garden while you were upstairs. Shiyun and the others are trying to contain them, but... She gestured to the monitors. On the screens, Chloe could see figures moving through the house, men in dark clothing, carrying weapons, searching room by room. Who are they? Chloe asked. Lim Changjung's people, Mrs. Han said, and Jae-sung's face darkened. Changjung, I thought we had an understanding. Apparently not anymore. On one of the monitors, Chloe saw a man she recognized. The same man who'd been in the SUV following her weeks ago. He was directing the others, pointing toward the stairs. "They're coming up," she said. Jae-sung studied the monitors for a moment, then turned to Mrs. Han. "Take them to the garage, use the tunnel." "What tunnel?" Chloe asked. "Emergency exit," Jae-sung said curtly. "It leads to the neighbor's property. Mrs. Han knows what to do from there." "What about you?" "I'm going to end this." The cold finality in his voice made Chloe's blood run cold. "You can't fight 8 men alone." "I won't be alone. Shiyun and the others are outnumbered," Mrs. Han interrupted. "Sir, you should come with us. We can regroup later." "No." Jae-sung's voice was absolute. "They came into my home. They threatened my family. This ends tonight." He knelt down to Jun Seo's level, his expression softening. "I need you to go with Mrs. Han, okay? Take care of your wife for me." "I want to stay with you," Jun Seo said, tears streaming down his face. "I know, buddy. But the most important job I can give you right now is to keep Chloe safe. Can you do that for me?" Jun Seo nodded reluctantly, then threw his arms around his father's neck. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, son. More than anything." Jae-sung stood and looked at Chloe. For a moment, his mask slipped completely, and she saw everything he felt for her written across his face. "Take care of him," he said quietly. "Take care of yourself," she replied. He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Chloe?" "Yeah?" "When this is over, if I'm still alive, I'm going to ask you to marry me for real, just so you know." Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the darkness of the house. Mrs. Han was already moving, gathering supplies from hidden compartments around the room. "We need to go now." The tunnel was exactly what it sounded like, a narrow passageway that ran underground from the safe room to a hidden exit in the neighbor's garden. As they crawled through the cramped space, Chloe could hear the sounds of fighting above them, muffled but terrifying. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked Mrs. Han. "Mr. Yoon is very capable," the older woman replied. "And he has everything to fight for." They emerged in a garden 3 houses down from the Yoon property. Mrs. Han immediately pulled out a phone and made a call in rapid Korean. Within minutes, a car appeared, not one of the luxury vehicles Chloe associated with Jae-sung, but a nondescript sedan. "Where are we going?" Chloe asked as they got in. "Safe house," Mrs. Han said. "Mr. Yoon has several. We'll wait there." The safe house turned out to be a modest apartment in Koreatown, the kind of place that would never attract attention. As Mrs. Han settled Jun Seo on the couch with a tablet and headphones, Chloe paced the small living room, her mind racing. "How long do we wait?" she asked. "As long as it takes." "And if he doesn't come back?" Mrs. Han's face was grave. "Then we follow the plan he made for that possibility, which is, you and Jun Seo disappear, new identities, new life, far from here." The thought made Chloe's chest tight. He planned for his own death? Mr. Yoon plans for everything. It's how he's survived this long. Hours passed. Jun Seo eventually fell asleep on the couch, exhausted by fear and adrenaline. Mrs. Han made tea and tried to get Chloe to eat, but food was the last thing on her mind. It was nearly dawn when Mrs. Han's phone finally rang. She answered in Korean, her voice tense. The conversation was brief, and when she hung up, her shoulders sagged with relief. "He's alive," she said simply. "And the others?" "Chang Jung's men are dead, all of them." Chloe should have been horrified by the casual way Mrs. Han delivered the news. Instead, she felt only relief that Jae-sung was safe. "When can we see him?" "Soon. He's cleaning up, making sure there are no loose ends." When Jae-sung finally arrived at the safe house, he looked like he'd been through a war. His clothes were torn and blood-stained, his knuckles split and raw. But he was alive. And when he saw Jun Seo sleeping on the couch, his face crumpled with relief. "Is he okay?" he asked quietly. "He's fine," Chloe said. "Scared, but fine." Jae-sung sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 33 years and more. "I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry you had to be part of it. Are you hurt?" "Nothing that won't heal." Chloe moved to the kitchen and returned with a damp cloth and a first aid kit she'd found in the bathroom. Without asking permission, she began cleaning the cuts on his hands. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. I want to." They sat in silence as she worked, the intimacy of the moment somehow more intense than anything they'd shared before. When she finished bandaging his knuckles, she looked up to find him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. "I meant what I said," he said quietly, "about asking you to marry me. Jae-sung, I know it's crazy. I know my world is dangerous and complicated and nothing like what you deserve, but I love you, Chloe. I love you and I want to build something real with you, something that isn't based on pretend or fear or necessity. What about your business, your obligations? I'm done." The finality in his voice surprised her. "Tonight was the last time. I'm getting out. Can you do that?" "I can try. For you, for Junseo, I can try." Chloe looked over at the sleeping child, then back at the man who'd risked everything to protect them both. "Ask me," she said quietly. "What?" "Ask me to marry you." Jae-sung's eyes widened. Then slowly he slid off his chair and onto one knee, taking her hands in his bandaged ones. "Chloe Lopez," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "will you marry me? For real this time?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." From the couch came a sleepy voice. "Finally. I told you she was perfect, Daddy." They turned to find Junseo sitting up, grinning despite everything they'd been through. "How long have you been awake?" Jae-sung asked. "Long enough to know that my wife said yes to being your wife too," Junseo said matter-of-factly. "Does this mean we're going to be a real family now?" Chloe looked at Jae-sung, then at the little boy who'd started it all with his innocent declaration in the park. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We're going to be a real family." 6 months later, Chloe woke up to the sound of ocean waves and the smell of fresh coffee. The beach house in Malibu was a far cry from her tiny studio apartment in downtown LA, but it had become home in a way she'd never thought possible. "Good morning, wife," Junseo said, appearing in the doorway of the bedroom with a tray that held coffee, orange juice, and what looked like pancakes shaped like hearts. "Good morning, husband," Chloe replied, sitting up and accepting the tray with appropriate ceremony. "Did you make this yourself?" "Daddy helped. But I did the hearts," Junseo said proudly. "He said today is special because it's been 6 months since you said yes to marrying him for real." 6 months already, Chloe marveled. It felt like both a lifetime and no time at all. "That's right," came Jae-sung's voice from the doorway. He leaned against the frame, wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. The constant tension that had once defined him was gone, replaced by something that looked remarkably like peace. "And how are we celebrating this momentous occasion?" Chloe asked, taking a sip of the perfectly brewed coffee. "Beach day," Junseo announced, "and then dinner at that place with the really good pasta." And then it's a surprise," Jae-sung interrupted with a smile ruffling his son's hair. The month since that terrifying night had been a whirlwind of change. True to his word, Jae-sung had extracted himself from the family business, turning control over to Yoon Shi-yoon and the Council of Elders. It hadn't been easy. There had been negotiations, concessions, and more than a few tense meetings, but eventually an agreement had been reached. The Yoon family would maintain their legitimate business interests while gradually phasing out their less legal activities. Jae-sung would serve as an advisor when needed, but would no longer be actively involved in day-to-day operations. In exchange, he and his family would be left in peace. "What are you thinking about?" Jae-sung asked, settling on the bed beside her. "Just how different everything is," Chloe said. 6 months ago, I was cleaning office buildings and living paycheck to paycheck. Now you're family," Junseo said matter-of-factly, climbing onto the bed between them. "And family means forever." Chloe's heart squeezed. The transition hadn't been without its challenges. There had been moments of culture shock, times when the vast difference in their backgrounds felt insurmountable. There had been nightmares about that night at the house, therapy sessions for all of them to process the trauma, and long conversations about what their future would look like. But there had also been moments of pure joy, teaching Junseo to ride a bike on the beach, cooking Korean dishes with Mrs. Han, who had insisted on moving to the beach house with them. Quiet evenings when the three of them would curl up on the couch and watch movies, feeling like the most normal family in the world. Speaking of family, Jae-sung said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. This came yesterday. Chloe recognized the return address immediately. It was from Dr. Christopher Miller, Jun Seo's pediatrician, but also the doctor who had been helping them navigate the legal aspects of their new family structure. "The adoption papers?" she asked, her heart racing. "All approved," Jae-sung said, his voice thick with emotion. "Officially, legally, you're Jun Seo's mother." Chloe felt tears spring to her eyes. They'd started the adoption process almost immediately after getting engaged, but the legal system moved slowly, especially when one of the parties had a complicated background like Jae-sung's. "Really?" Jun Seo asked, his eyes wide. "Really, really? Really, really," Chloe confirmed, pulling him into a fierce hug. "You're stuck with me now, kiddo." "Good," he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I picked you first anyway." After breakfast, they spent the day on the beach. Jae-sung had taught Jun Seo to surf, and Chloe loved watching them in the water together, her two boys, brown from the sun, laughing as they tumbled off their boards into the waves. She was reading on the beach when Nicole Rivera appeared, carrying a cooler and wearing a grin that spelled trouble. "Surprise," Nicole announced, setting down the cooler with a thud. "I brought reinforcements." "Nicole, what are you doing here?" "Your fiancé called me," Nicole said, settling onto the sand beside Chloe's chair. "Said you might need some girl talk before tonight." "Girl talk about what?" Nicole's grin widened. "Oh, honey, you really don't know, do you?" Before Chloe could ask what she meant, Jae-sung and Jun Seo were jogging up from the water, both dripping and grinning. "Nicole!" Jun Seo launched himself at Chloe's best friend, who caught him in a wet hug without complaint. "Did you come to see Daddy ask Mommy to marry him again?" "Jun Seo," Jae-sung said warningly, but he was smiling. "Again." Chloe looked between them suspiciously. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Jae-sung said innocently. "Just dinner, like we planned." But Chloe could see the nervous energy in his posture, the way he kept checking his watch. Something was definitely happening. The restaurant was one they'd been to before, a small Italian place in Santa Monica that Jun Seo loved because they let him help make his own pizza. But tonight, something was different. The owner greeted them like old friends and led them not to their usual table, but to a private dining room Chloe hadn't known existed. The room was beautiful, intimate lighting, flowers everywhere, and a table set for just the three of them. But what made Chloe's breath catch was the wall of photographs, pictures of them from the past 6 months, candid shots of their new life together, and in the center, the very first photo Jae-sung had taken of her and Jun Seo in the park. "Jae-sung," she whispered, "what is this?" "This," he said, taking her hand, "is me asking you to marry me properly, with flowers and candles and our son as a witness. But you already asked me. I already said yes." "That was in a safe house after the worst night of our lives," Jae-sung said. "You deserve better than that. You deserve romance and beauty and all the things I couldn't give you then." He dropped to one knee right there in the restaurant, pulling out a ring box that made Chloe's eyes widen. The ring inside was stunning, a classic solitaire that caught the candlelight like captured starfire. "Chloe Lopez," Jae-sung said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "6 months ago, my son chose you to be his wife in a game of pretend. Tonight I'm asking you to choose us for real. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Jun Seo's mother and the heart of our family. Say yes, Mommy," Jun Seo whispered loudly. "Say yes so we can have cake." Chloe laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it." The ring fit perfectly. Of course it did. Jae-sung had thought of everything. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Since the day I met you," he said simply. "I just didn't know it then." Dinner was perfect. Jun Seo's favorite foods, wine that probably cost more than Chloe used to make in a month, and conversation that flowed as easily as breathing. They talked about wedding plans, small ceremony on the beach, honeymoon destinations. Jun Seo voted for Disneyland, and the future they were building together. "There's one more thing," Jae-sung said as they finished dessert. "I know we've talked about this, but I want to make it official." He pulled out another envelope, this one thick with legal documents. What now? Chloe asked, laughing. Name change papers, for all of us. Chloe's smile faded as she realized what he was saying. Jae-sung, you don't have to. I want to, he said firmly. The Yoon name comes with too much history, too much baggage. I want us to start fresh, all of us. But your family, your heritage. My heritage is what I choose to pass down to my son, and what I want to pass down is love, loyalty, and the knowledge that family is something you choose, not something you're born into. He looked at Junseo, who was listening with the serious expression he wore when adults talked about important things. What do you think, buddy? Want to be a Lopez? Will I still be Korean? Junseo asked. Always, Jae-sung assured him. Your mother Seo Hyun-jin was Korean, and that part of you will never change. But your name, your future, that can be whatever we decide together. Junseo considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Then he nodded decisively. I want to be Junseo Lopez. It sounds good with my American name, too. Your American name? Chloe asked. Jason, Junseo said proudly. Mrs. Han helped me pick it. Jason Lopez. That's going to be my name for school. Chloe looked at the papers, then at the two people who had become her entire world. 6 months ago, she'd been alone, struggling, dreaming of a family she thought she'd never have. Now she was sitting in an expensive restaurant, wearing an engagement ring that probably cost more than her old apartment, planning a future that seemed too good to be true. Are you sure about this? She asked Jae-sung quietly. All of it. The name change, leaving your old life behind? I've never been more sure of anything, he said. You saved us, Chloe, both of us. You took a broken man and a lonely little boy and made us into a family. The least I can do is give you a name that represents who we're choosing to be, not who we used to be. That night, after Junseo had fallen asleep between them in the big bed, a habit they were still trying to break, Chloe lay awake listening to the sound of the ocean and thinking about the strange turns life could take. A year ago, she'd been nobody special, just another invisible person cleaning up after other people's lives. Now she was engaged to a man who loved her desperately, mother to a child who had chosen her first, and part of a family that felt more real than anything she'd ever known. What are you thinking about? Jae-sung whispered in the darkness. Fairy tales, she whispered back. Good ones or bad ones? The kind where the princess doesn't need rescuing because she's too busy rescuing everyone else. Jae-sung's laugh was soft and warm. I love you, Chloe Lopez. I love you too, Jae-sung Lopez. From between them came a sleepy voice. I love you both. Now can we please go to sleep? Tomorrow we're going to plan the best wedding ever. As Chloe drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the two people who had become her everything, she thought about that first day in the park when a little boy had declared her his wife. She'd had no idea then that saying yes to a child's game of pretend would lead to the most real thing she'd ever experienced. Sometimes the best families were the ones you chose. Sometimes love really was enough, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, a simple yes could change everything. The beach was perfect for a wedding, not too crowded, with gentle waves lapping at the shore and the California sun painting everything in shades of gold. Chloe stood at the edge of the water in a simple white dress that flowed in the ocean breeze, watching as their small group of guests took their seats on the sand. Nicole Rivera was there, of course, serving as maid of honor and crying before the ceremony had even started. Mrs. Han sat in the front row, beaming with pride as she watched Junseo, now officially Jason, practice walking down the aisle with the rings. Dr. Christopher Miller had come, along with Han Hyo-ju from the community center where Chloe now volunteered. Yoon Shi-yoon was there too, representing the family that Jae-sung had once led, his presence a sign of respect and blessing for the new life they were building. But the person Chloe was most excited to see was Yoon Jae-moon, Jae-sung's grandfather, who had flown in from Seoul specifically for the wedding. The elderly man had been skeptical at first about his grandson's dramatic life change, but one video call with Jason had won him over completely. You ready for this? Nicole asked, adjusting Chloe's simple veil. I've been ready since the day a 5-year-old boy asked me to be his wife in a playground, Chloe replied. The ceremony was officiated by Father Michael O'Connor from the local parish. A kind man who had spent hours with them in pre-marriage counseling and had become something of a family friend. As the music started, a string quartet playing a Korean lullaby that had been Seo Hyun-jin's favorite, Chloe felt her heart swell with emotion. Jason walked down the aisle first, wearing a miniature tuxedo and carrying the rings with the solemnity of someone entrusted with the crown jewels. When he reached the altar, he turned and gave Chloe a thumbs up that made the entire gathering laugh. Then it was her turn. She'd chosen to walk alone. She'd been alone for so long that it felt right to come to this moment on her own terms, choosing her family rather than being given away by one. But as she walked across the sand toward Jae-sung, she realized she wasn't alone at all. Every step was surrounded by the love of people who had become her chosen family, people who had supported and celebrated this unlikely love story from the beginning. Jae-sung stood waiting for her in a simple black suit, his hair slightly tousled by the ocean breeze, his eyes bright with unshed tears. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You're so beautiful." "You clean up pretty well yourself," she whispered back. Father O'Connor began the ceremony with words about love, commitment, and the families we choose, but Chloe barely heard them. She was too busy memorizing this moment, the feel of sand between her toes, the sound of waves in the background, the way Jae-sung looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever made. When it came time for vows, Jae-sung went first. "Chloe," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the beach. "2 years ago, my son chose you to be his wife in a game of pretend. Today, I'm choosing you to be my wife in the most real thing I've ever done. You took 2 broken people and made us whole. You taught us that love isn't something to be feared or hidden, but something to be celebrated and shared. You are my heart, my home, and my future. I promise to love you, protect you, and choose you every day for the rest of my life." Chloe's vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "Jae-sung, you and Jason gave me something I'd been searching for my entire life. A place to belong. You taught me that family isn't about blood or background, but about choosing to love someone completely, flaws and all. You've shown me what it means to be cherished, protected, and valued. I promise to love you both, to be the mother Jason deserves and the wife you need, and to never take for granted the miracle of being chosen by you." When Father O'Connor pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss was soft, sweet, and full of promise. But the real celebration began when Jason threw himself at both of them, wrapping his arms around their legs and shouting, "We did it! We're really married now." The reception was held right there on the beach, with tables set up on the sand and lights strung between palm trees. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Chloe found herself on the dance floor with her new husband, swaying to music that seemed to come from the ocean itself. "Any regrets?" Jae-sung asked quietly. "Only one," Chloe said, and his face fell slightly. "I regret that it took us so long to get here." His smile could have powered the entire coastline. "We got here eventually. That's what matters." "Daddy! Mommy!" Jason appeared beside them, tugging on Chloe's dress. "Grandfather wants to take pictures, and Mrs. Han says there's cake, and Nicole is crying again." They spent the rest of the evening surrounded by laughter, love, and the kind of joy that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. As the night wound down and their guests began to leave, Chloe found herself standing at the edge of the water with her new family, watching the stars reflect on the waves. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we go home," Jae-sung said simply. "We tuck our son into bed. We plan our honeymoon to Disneyland, and we live happily ever after." Just like that? Just like that. Jason, who had been building a sandcastle nearby, looked up at them with the wisdom that only children possess. "You know what the best part is," he said. "What's that, sweetheart?" Chloe asked. "I told you that you were my wife that very first day, and I was right. I'm really good at picking wives." As they walked back toward the house, hand in hand, Chloe thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a child's innocent declaration in a playground and had led them through danger, fear, love, and ultimately to this perfect moment on a beach in Malibu. Sometimes the best love stories were the ones that began with pretend and ended with forever. Sometimes a simple yes to a child's game could change 3 lives completely. And sometimes, if you were very, very lucky, You got to marry your best friend twice, once in a playground and once for real. Behind them, the ocean sang its eternal song, and ahead of them, their future stretched out bright and full of possibility. They were no longer just Chloe, Jae-sung, and Jason. They were the Lopez family, and they were home.